Are there any particular passages that come to mind that you can comment on that have a very significant meaning to you?
In the first book, the one of my probably my favorite passage in the first book is about a daddy's girl versus a mama's girl. And I think that was, I can remember it because I wrote that for Tanya as someone who was a mama's girl. Tanya was a mama's girl and not a daddy's girl. So when I wrote that passage about Zora, I was thinking of Tanya. So I remember that.
And then, so okay, that's 2005 that the initial idea starts and you
Mhm.
guys get going. At what point, because I'm trying to figure out why we're just now getting to book three here in 2020,
Yeah,
15 years later, when one of you was a literary agent and one of you worked for a literary agent. You guys should have had some inside tracks, right?
oh, well, I think that's true. We had some inside tracks, but I don't know if anyone has inside tracks to writing a manuscript. It's like you can have inside tracks to publishing, but really the hashing out of the manuscript, I think, is a completely different ball game. So the first book was really seamless, but it took a long time for it to get published. The second book, however, we went back and forth drafts for years that didn't work before we finally decided and were able to see, look, we don't even want to write the same book now. We have to split this off, and you do book two and I do book three, because we're trying to mash books together that don't live in the same universe. We're trying to make a Frankenstein body, Frankenstein's monster. Hey, wait a second, these are two different books. So it took a lot of time to figure out that we weren't writing the same book for book two. And that's how we each were assigned, you do book two and I'll do book three.
How'd you decide which would be which?
Well, because I wanted to, and I guess this is a spoiler, I wanted to kill Zora's mother. Like
It's a huge spoiler.
yeah,
Yes.
I kind of, so I was always like, I want to kill her. Like, I want her to die. Like, I want to try to write like that kind of sad thing. I want to write something that has a really definitive ending. So I always had my mind on Zora's mother dying. So, given that was the case, it made sense for me to close it out. Tanya was really into Old Lady Bronson. So, and she wanted to explore Old Lady Bronson, and I wanted to kill Zora. So, once we each had our thing, then it made sense, who gets to do which book.
What a tremendous amount of trust, because of course if the cursed ground isn't any good, we don't have to worry about readers keeping with the series to book three. And then of course if the cursed ground, as we know, was amazing, well, now Tanya has to hope that you land this thing.
Yeah.
That's the big moment, right? It's book three. This is the trilogy capper.
Well, it's funny, Rob. I think what we have found from book two to now book three is that I don't know how book two and book three are going to do, but I think it's book one that keeps selling. I think the Summoner coming out just helps book one. I think Tanya's book just really helped book one. So I hope that Zora and Me, the first book, can kind of pull the rest of the trilogy up, so to speak. So it's our joint effort that is kind of the engine of this train, and I think Tanya's book, the sequel, is the best one. I think my book has a lot more depth than the first one, so it's a funny situation to be in when I think book two and book three are more mature than the first book. But I think the first book just keeps going. It's just like a little engine that first book just keeps selling. So we'll just see how it goes.
So, when you're working on book two and book three, and Tanya's doing her thing, you're doing your thing, is it really as clear cut as that, or are you still going over each other's drafts and refining some version of the initial voice that you started off with that was a combination of your?
Yeah, no, it was a clean break in that regard. I read Tanya's book maybe like a draft and a half, like 1.5 draft. So it was pretty much like all there, so I was just like, wow, this is a great book, and I think, I gave the draft of The Summoner because I'm slower and messier. I think I couldn't give it to anyone to read until maybe like draft 3.5, and unlike Tanya, who writes really fast, I write really slowly. So, so our pace was just completely different. And yeah, I think it worked out okay. I wonder how similar the voices are. You read all 3 books, Rob. What do you think? Are the voices similar? Does it go astray? I hope that it coheres.
I think that they're very, very similar throughout. I could tell a clear difference in some of the prose with The Summoner versus The Cursed Ground.
Mm-hmm.
But that's because I just went back and reread part of The Cursed Ground because it had been a couple of years. Like, oh yeah, what happened last book? Okay, right. I'm reading a book at least every week just to keep up with guests on the podcast. Plus, my own for fun reading.
You're a hero.
Yes, that is what I was getting at. I'm glad you said it, so I didn't have to.